Let's begin with a question.
Kia ora, nau mai haramai to another episode of Curiously Catholic, the Evangelion podcast. We're going to be talking to Pat Barett today about Divine Mercy. And what I've found out is it's a very broad topic. There's lots to talk about, so I'm keen to get involved in that. But one thing that Pat is doing, which you can get involved into, is the Divine Mercy Conference, which is happening in May at Rosmini College. There's going to be more details on our Instagram page and stuff. We're going to be helping promote that. It's a very exciting conference. There's going to be 7 speakers from around the world. And we're going to talk to Pat a bit about his relationship with Divine Mercy and what his role in it all is. So, let's get it right. And welcome, Pat.
Hello, nice to see you.
Nice to see you. So, Pat, can you just tell us a bit about yourself? You're part of a group called NZACOM, is that right?
Well, loosely. I mean, we're Divine Mercy New Zealand, Divine Mercy Charitable Trust that set up, my wife and I set up a bit over 30 years ago. To promote the Divine Mercy message and devotion. We were asked to do that by one of the speakers who came to our very first conference, which would have been 96, I think it was, held at St Bede's College in Christchurch. And one of the speakers that came to that was a man called Val Conlon, who ran Divine Mercy Publications in Ireland. And he asked me at the end of that conference if I'd be interested in taking on promoting Divine Mercy Publications in New Zealand.
Right. Okay. So you've been doing the charitable trust for 30 years, but you've actually been more involved in it for a bit longer than that.
Yeah, look, probably a little bit longer. If we first started promoting Marian apparitions and messages with a like-minded Catholic, John Kirsten. Don't know if you've heard of him. He was a dairy farmer from the coast, and John and I travelled the country back in those days. That would have been maybe about 5 years prior to taking on the Divine Mercy work, promoting Marian messages as part of that, and particularly Medjugorje, but also other approved messages as well. And then we sort of were introduced to Divine Mercy mostly through John Canavan, who we were talking about earlier. Who came to New Zealand, that would have been about 94, right? I think, and wanted to promote Divine Mercy here then.
That's great. Because I met John when I went to Melbourne for my mate's wedding, and he's got a good he's got a big kind of deal going on there. I stayed at his shop, and he's got lots of stuff, and he's all about promoting it. You mentioned we mentioned about Divine Mercy and how you linked it kind of to apparitions of Mary, and I've been Catholic since I was about 20 or something, so about 15 years now, and it was one thing that's always struck me about Catholicism. We've got lots of weird things like apparitions of Mary. So like it's from the outside it's an old dusty institution with like lots of old men that like to wear funny dresses, but when you start digging into it, like there's a lot of truth there, and as you start digging further, it's like, there's weird things too, like Mary appears to people and the sun dances in the sky and all these things. And I think there's kind of an element of, interesting, but also, a bit kooky. And so I feel like, that's the weird side of Catholicism that like even Catholics, some Catholics are like, we don't touch that. So how did you get into it? What do you think of it all?
Well, I guess I've got the sort of the drop on some of that, although it's still not, because you still have to take it on board yourself. Being a cradle Catholic, you just grow up with that, and it's just part of the furniture. You're not trying to be disrespectful, but that's what it is, and so you learn to believe those things through just your imbibing that richness of the Catholic heritage, and our Blessed Mother is central to that. And I grew up with a great devotion to the Blessed Mother, just through my parents, praying the Rosary and those traditional things of interest. Perhaps for your listeners, is that I was born on December the 12th, which is the feast of Our Lady of Guadalupe, the patroness of the Americas and the mother of the unborn. And it's interesting that a lot of the work that I've done in Catholic circles prior to Divine Mercy was working with protection for the unborn. So it's very interesting. I find that, I think especially, a little digress here a little bit, but perhaps for Catholics who are finding their way, I guess we're all finding our way in one sense or another, but perhaps those who just started out finding their way, perhaps we could say that. I think it's always quite important to look at who your patron saints are,
Mm.
and if you were born on any particular feast day of note, and who that saint might be. I think that's a great indicator of God's plan for you. And I think it's always found that helpful for myself when you maybe start to drift and thinking, what am I doing? Should I still be doing this work? You always sort of take you back to those those gifts and ideas that the Lord planted in your mind, when you're just a little baby, I assume.
Yeah. No, it's interesting. Yeah, being a convert myself, and I've got my colleague Josh. He's recently, in the last maybe 4 years, he converted to Catholicism from Protestant, and he's worked for like an
Mm.
apologetics company that is
Right.
Protestant for years.
Okay.
And so, like, he's obviously someone that's very well informed in his faith and has been on the opposite side doing apologetics in a Protestant world. And yeah, it's interesting jumping into all of this, like this idea of Catholic furniture. And one thing that strikes him, and it struck me as well when I came into the faith, is just how much Catholics kind of know without knowing they know. So, like, you go to mass and you experience things, and you have certain
Yeah.
language and you have certain prayers that are just your bread and butter, just like you say, like part of the furniture. You have that, and yeah, and it really does form who you are and how
Mm.
you exist. And
Yeah.
it kind of manifests in these weird devotions with rosary beads and
Mhm.
images and statues and incense, and yeah, it always amazes me like how interconnected it all is.
Yes.
um
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, I
yeah.
think I sort of see it as a great heavenly family. They're just surrounded by these crowds of saints and the Blessed Mother, Saint Joseph, and they're all there, and the three uh, parts of the church. The church triumphant, the church suffering, and the church militant, and uh, that we're all linked in this great journey of faith, and
Mm,
all helping and praying for one another. I mean, obviously the church triumphant doesn't need our prayers, but we certainly need theirs, and we are always asking for their intercession. And this great crowd of witnesses, in the heavenly places, and it's such a blessing at difficult times, in times of discernment, to be able to call upon those saints of the past and see how they lived their lives and how they struggled with various things. And the greatest of all those saints, of course, is the Blessed Mother, and
mm,
and she's just there for us, to help us along our way, which is partly why she appears so often, because
mm.
so many of her children are lost and don't know what to do anymore, or how to live life, and how to live life to the full, and to live a holy life. And so she's there. That's why she keeps appearing in different places to remind us of those truths.
Yeah, yeah, it's beautiful. Oh man, just so many things. Yeah, because I was thinking like one of the things that like at the beginning of my entrance into Catholicism, one of the things that actually kind of like I'd already decided I want to be Catholic. I think I'd even be baptized at this point. It was a saint. Saint Alban was a guy that like I heard his story, and all of a sudden I was like, I think I get it, and
Mm.
then like that was my confirmation saint. And so
Right.
yeah, like and like we think as humans we try and I think especially like in the modern world we group things together, we categorize them, everything is empirical, has to be explainable and understandable.
Yeah.
And it's like one thing that I've noticed is every time we say, oh well, this is causing a problem, so I'll take that out, and we don't realize that that's interconnected to so many different things. And like we see that like
Yeah.
with the Protestants, they're like, oh well, we don't like these parts, so we won't do that.
Yeah.
And it boosts up one area, but it brings down another area
Yes.
of their faith.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think
Yeah.
it's amazing how the Catholic Church, just very much like the human body, is so interconnected.
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely.